So, the first thing I'm going to talk about is biotech, which is the class I am taking. Biotech is, like I said, an offshoot of biology, and biology is, of course, the study of life, from the Greek bio, life, logi, study of. And as the name suggests, biology is combining the field of biology with modern technology, and the idea is that we, scientists, are going out into nature and finding various things that nature can already do for itself, frequently in bacteria, plants, and animals such as ourselves, and using modern technology and modern understanding of that science to change it and help it use it to solve some sort of a problem that may crop up. You have things like biomedicine, so curing diseases in plants and animals using tools that nature has already provided, but adapting them so that you can suddenly cure a disease using something that you can find in a bacteria or a plant. Most household cleaning products are the end result of some sort of biotechnology because they contain some substance that we've derived from some sort of cleaning product. And then our topic of the day, GMs, genetically modified foods that we eat on a daily basis. Okay, in order to understand anything remotely related to biology, you do have to understand about the way that life is created and the way that we have built upon it. And next year in biology, you will spend weeks and weeks on all this sort of stuff. So this is just a very quick review, and if you remember it next year, you will be ahead, and your biology teacher will love you, and you should tell them that it was me, so they love me too. But it's all based on a lovely little molecule called deoxyribonucleic acid, more commonly known as DNA. And I'm guessing you all have heard of DNA. Nod, right? And shake your head vigorously if you have not heard of it. So DNA is the building blocks of life. It's a recipe for what makes all of us who we are. This is a model of a very short structure of DNA, and it has a very distinctive form. It's the double helix, right, which looks a little bit like a spiral staircase. And on either side you have what is called the backbone. And that is created of sugar phosphate groups, which are various types of molecules, and you will get into all how this links together next year in biology. But it's important to remember that there's a sugar phosphate backbone, and then within that are pairs of, they're called base pairs. They're molecular bases. And there's only 4 kinds, and they are adenine or A, thymine or T, cytosine C, guanine G. You don't remember the long names, just remember A, C, G, T. And the thing about them is that all A's go with a corresponding T, and all C's go with a corresponding G. So I know it's difficult to see, but this side says A, and this side says T, and that side says G, and that side says C, and so on and so forth. So if you know one half, you can figure out the other half of this sequence. And even though there's only 4 of them, there are so many millions of them in each one of our cells, tiny, very, very small, wrapped up, into a little package in each one of the nucleuses of our cells. Because there are so many variations in that and so many possible patterns, those 4 in endless combination create all of us and make us all unique. Now, unique is kind of a strange word to use because, in fact, we're not particularly unique, genetically speaking. You and I and Mr. Daffy are all 50% the same genetically as a banana. So there's a fun fact you can surprise your friends or if it ever comes up on Jeopardy! Furthermore, we are all about 99.9% alike, which means that we're really quite closely genetically related, even though we all look and sound and move in very, very different ways. And that is because of the very small changes within our DNA. And now, because there are so many base pairs, that 0.1% is really quite a large number of them, but proportionally it's a very small number. So changing a small number of the base pairs can have an enormous effect later on. Questions so far? Okay. Okay, this is the big thing that you should definitely remember next year for biology, because this is like the guiding principle. It is called the central dogma. And here it is. DNA goes to RNA, to proteins, to express traits. Now what this means is that if, say for example, I invite one or some or all of you over to my house to have some soup, because we're very good friends. Yeah, exactly, right? We all invite our friends over for soup, or something. You know, maybe it's cake. You know, maybe we don't like soup very much. But I decide I'm going to make something for you, make some sort of food. I'm not just going to buy something from Whole Foods. So I sit down and I put together, I follow a recipe that I have, and I put together something. And because I'm such a fabulous cook, it tastes fantastic. And however many of you I've invited over all decide that it's really great, and you want to have this all the time. And much as you'd love to spend every day at my house, you want to be able to make it at your house too. So I suggest, well, here, why don't you copy down my recipe? So the recipe that I have is a little bit like DNA. It's the recipe for how to create this wonderful soup, cake, food item. And when you copy it down, you are transcribing it in a process called transcription to a new recipe, which is the equivalent of RNA in our little central dogma here. So if you think about it, you're copying it down, and this actually happens within a cell. Not you, but a part of your cell copies down the information of the DNA and creates an RNA template that has the same information in slightly different handwriting, if you will. So now you go home, a day passes, and you're like, my God, that soup, cake, food thing was really, really good, and I have an enormous craving for it right now. So you pull out your recipe, and you gather your ingredients, and you make it, right? You follow the recipe very diligently, and you put in, well, let's say we're making soup, because I don't know really how to make cake, and you put in your raw water or your chicken broth, and you've got your celery and your carrots and your salt, and perhaps you have meat in there or something. Anyway, you follow the recipe, and you cook it for a little while, and when it's done, it's going to taste a certain way and look a certain way and smell a certain way, because directly related to what you've done to it following the recipe. So if, for example, I don't know, thinking back on it, having eaten it a second time, you really don't like those carrots in there. I mean, ugh. And you decide, well, I'd rather put tomatoes in. So you go back and you think, okay, next time I'm going to put tomatoes in, and the way I'm going to do this so that it's now my soup is I'm just going to cross off carrots and write in tomatoes, and suddenly I've changed the recipe. Well, perhaps you want to go a step further. So you call me up and you say, you know what, I don't like those carrots. You really need to replace them with tomatoes, and I changed my recipe and you should change yours. So now I go and I change my recipe and I put in tomatoes. And so when I have more friends over who happen to like my wonderful soup, and they copy it out and make it themselves, it's not going to have carrots in it anymore, it's going to have tomatoes. And that is the same kind of idea with going back. If you want to change the end expressive trait, the taste, the smell, the way it looks, you can go, if you go all the way back to the DNA or the recipe and change it, if by following the process, you copy it over, you make it, and you eat it, it's gonna do something different because of a small change that you've made in the original recipe. So how do you change a trait? You go back and you change the DNA. With me so far? Questions? Okay. Genetic engineering and genetic modification. Before I talk a little bit about this, I want to know what you already know. So, who has heard the term GEGM? Yes? A couple of you? Excellent. Fabulous. Alright. Somebody who has raised their hand and is confident in their abilities to talk about it. What do you already know, and yes?
It's when you change the characteristics of something, or the genes of something, like the very building blocks of it, to make it something different, to modify it.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better, although I will probably try and fail. But yes, that's exactly right. You go back and you change the DNA, and boom, you have a totally new product. Does anybody, more interesting facts that you know about GMs, other than what it is? Yes?
Well, like, my brother's in, biotech, I guess.
Oh.
You just tell me how, I guess he's, really against, I don't know, McDonald's and stuff. They're all using, GMOs and stuff to, make the cows bigger and make it so, everything is just, bigger and cheaper, and it's a lot less healthy, I guess, because our bodies aren't, used to, the fakeness of it, I guess. So that's just, what he told me, is that you want to try and get foods that, aren't genetically modified, because they don't really, think about, the outcome of, how it affects their body. They just, think of how they're going to make more for cheap.
Okay. So possibility of some business corruption in the GM industry, which we will definitely get to shortly.